Welcome to H. Gerstner & Sons video on how to measure and cut leatherette for a Gerstner chest. Walter Rickard, one of Gerstner's veteran employees, will demonstrate how he measures each part of a Gerstner chest to determine the size of leatherette needed to properly cover that area of the chest. Some supplies that you will need are a tape measure, pencil and paper, a utility knife, and a white grease pencil, fabric pencil, or chalk to mark the cut lines on the leatherette. The first part that Walter is measuring is the front lid for the chest. If your front lid has a center panel like this one, we will cover the entire lid except the recessed portion of the center panel, which will have felt installed. To measure the front lid, you need to measure the entire width of the outside face of the lid, plus the thickness of the lid on each end, typically a ½ inch. And measure the inside face of the front lid from the edge of the lid to 1 inch inside the center panel on each side. Add up your measurements, and this will give you the total length of the leatherette needed for the front lid. When you are ready, you can mark the size of the front lid onto the leatherette. You want to make sure that you are marking your parts on the inside of the leatherette, not the outside face of the material. If you don't have a straight edge to use to draw your lines, you can improvise like Walter and use the front lid for a straight edge. Next, you will repeat the same measurements along the height of the front lid to determine the total height of the leatherette needed to cover the front lid. Mark the height needed on your leatherette and write down which part it is for. Now you are ready to cut out your first piece. Since the edges of the leatherette are not going to be seen when we are done, you don't have to be exact when you cut out the leatherette. If you are using a utility knife, you will want to cut the leatherette on a workbench or a cutting board to avoid damaging the surface underneath. Next, we're going to measure the top lid for the chest. You want to start by measuring the inside height of the lid. You'll measure how thick the wood is for the lid, typically a ½ inch. You'll measure the outside height of the lid, and then you'll measure the full width of the lid. You'll take all these dimensions together, and that will equal the total length of the piece of leatherette that you will need to cut. Repeat the process to get the total height of your leatherette needed to cover the top lid. Write down the dimensions and you are ready to cut your next piece of leatherette, which will be used for the top lid. The next piece we are going to measure is the side of the chest. You can see some marks on the inside of the chest where the old leatherette was. You want to measure that to the front edge of the chest. You're going to take the thickness of the side of the chest, typically 1/2 inch. You're going to measure the full depth from front to back of the side, and then it's going to wrap around about 1 inch onto the back of the chest. This whole dimension will give you the total length that you will need for your side. And remember, you'll actually be cutting 2 of these pieces. To determine the height of the side, we are going to measure about 1 inch of the bottom of the chest plus the total height of the side. We will then take the thickness of the top, which is about 1/2 inch, and then we will measure inside the top well. We'll take all those dimensions, add them together to get the total height of the piece of leatherette needed. Now we are going to measure for the leatherette to be used on the back of the chest. The dimension we will use for the length of our leatherette is the measurement between the sides, not the overall width of the back, because the side pieces we cut are going to wrap around 1 inch to the back. We just need to measure between the sides for our overall length. The measurement for the height of the back will be the inside of the top well, plus the thickness at the top, plus the overall height of the back, plus 1 inch around the bottom of the chest. Those dimensions added up will give us our total height. Next, we're going to measure for the bottom of the chest. The bottom piece of leatherette typically goes in about 3 inches inside the chest. So we will measure 3 inches inside the chest, plus the thickness of the bottom, which is 1/2 inch, plus the bottom of the chest, but we will stop about 1/2 inch to 1 inch before the back of the chest. This will give us the total height of the piece of leatherette we need for the bottom. The length of leatherette needed for the bottom is the dimension between the sides. The last piece of leatherette that we need to measure for will cover the front rail of the chest. The length of this piece is going to be the dimension between the sides, which will be the same dimension that we had for the back and the bottom. For the height of this piece, we're going to measure inside the chest enough to go past the drawers, which is about 1.5 inches. Next, we'll measure the height of the front rail. Then we'll measure the thickness of the front rail, which should be 1/2 inch. Then we will measure inside the top well. All these dimensions together will give us the total height of the leatherette needed to cover the front rail. That was the last measurement. Now it's time to cut the rest of the parts out of the leatherette. Now that you've cut out all the parts for the chest, go back and make sure you didn't miss any. You'll need to make sure that you've got 2 pieces for the sides. There's a piece for the front rail, a piece for the bottom, another piece for the back. We also had a piece for the top lid and a piece for the front lid. In our next video, we will demonstrate how to glue the leatherette to the parts of the chest using Gerstner's Hue Glue. Hue Glue is a hot animal hide glue that is ideal for gluing the leatherette and felt to Gerstner chests. Thank you for watching our video and your interest in Gerstner products.